All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks for welcoming me and Stacy to your guys' weekly sync this week. As I kind of introduce myself, I'm Jennifer. I was a collabie turned into Collab Lab mentor. So after that quick intro, I know we have two teams. I checked on your retro board that right now you're working, one team's working on filtering and one team is working on the algorithm, right, in the fire storing the algorithm results to Firebase. So does any team have a preference of who wants to go first? Filter team or estimate team?
Nick, would you mind going first? I'm just still trying to clean up some of my stuff here. I'm running a bit late.
Yeah, sure. I can go. So I am the filter part this week, and I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, does everyone see me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is the filter is on an existing list. So to demonstrate that, we're just going to create a new list here. And we have it initially where it's the filter does not display actually until you add items to the list. So we're going to add a couple of things here. Okay, and then now when we see we have things, we have the filter box, input box up here. And as we type, it will match the items, and it works with any character. So we can do the end, something in the middle. And we also have, we're also normalizing cases kind of both ways. So we can do uppercase and the items will still come up. And we can also, if we added something in uppercase and we are filtering in lowercase, we will still find it. So let me just bring up the code here. So the most important part of this is just a dot filter call on the list items array that we're rendering. I decided to just add this directly in line since it was just a couple of lines of code here. So we do this with calling dot filter and then running a regular expression constructor. Thanks to Ander for this specific line here. This was helpful because this allows it to be case insensitive in both directions, with both if the item has been added in a certain case, or whether you are typing, the user is inputting a whatever case in the filter field. So we use the constructor. We're using the I modifier on a new filter state, and then we are running that against the item name of each item. So we have that filter state up here, and then that filter state is updated on change on the, where is that form? In here. So we have this handle input, and that updates the filter state. So that is pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the demo. I love the use of regex. But the first time you use regex always makes you feel like a coding wizard. So yeah, I really thank you so much, Ander, for. I love seeing like cross pair work, and so that was really great. So thank you so much for the demo. The only question I have actually is, did you consider what if there would be punctuation in something's name?
Yeah, so I believe you can, I believe it works with punctuation. So let's say we did this. I believe we just allow for that.
Okay.
So,
cool. So they just treat it like you just treat it like a normal character.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. That was the only question I had. Does anyone have any other questions about Nick's demo?
No,
was really
this
great
was
work.
beautiful. Yeah. So Nick, did you, since Sheila was out, did you just work on this one by yourself this week?
yeah, so we actually met sort of, I met with Ander and Connie. I worked on it on my own, and then we actually met midweek in like a sort of mob session
Oh,
to
good.
work with each other on both the issues.
I love that. That is really great teamwork. And
Yeah.
Jen's point on like the first time we use regex to be like a coding wizard. Every time I use regex, I feel like it's the first time I'm using regex. Like every time I use it, I'm like, I should commit some of this to memory. And then I don't. And then I go back into it like, God, how do I do this? This is hard. Regex for me is the hardest part of programming. And I can't explain why.
I always love when you go into one of those tools where you can kind of fine tune your regex to make sure you're getting exactly what you want to get. And then like, you know, a little later, someone's like, oh, what exactly is, we're going to have to run it back over to that tool.
Copy and paste it into the calculator. Yeah.
Cannot tell you. I love that. This is great. Really great work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if no one has any other questions or comments, we can probably move on to the next team's demos. So the get estimate, purchase date estimate, I think is what the algorithm is called.
Yep. Let me just share my screen. We thought it might be easier to start looking at the code because we really didn't change a whole lot, and like in terms of the UI, and I think it will make more sense to show that after. But our task this week, can you see what I'm looking at?
Yes.
Was to basically integrate this calculate estimate function that we're already given into our function that updates the data when you check off an item. So the calculate estimate function takes the last estimate, which is, you know, the last number of days that it thinks that you're going to have, you know, for a new in between purchases, and for a new item that would be what the user kind of provides as a guess, which is like soon 7, kind of soon 14, and not so soon 30, I think. So this we can get straight from the database already for our item, and the number of purchases we can also get straight from the database. We already have that, but the latest interval, which is the number of days between the last time it was purchased and now as you're checking it off, we have to calculate. So in order to do that, we to have a nice little date library to work with, we installed Luxon, which gives you a bunch of different date functionality. So here in our check is purchased function, this is what runs whenever whenever the checkbox is checked. We first make those dates, the right now and the last purchase date that we have from the database, into Luxon dates. And then we made this little helper function to figure out the difference between them. In some cases, like when you have a new item, the last purchase date will be null, so you can't do any meaningful calculation there. So we also account for the situation where it might be null. And in that case, we just use the previous like purchase interval in the database to, you know, have something to put in. And then we, run this calculate estimate function with those values, and we update everything in Firestore. And I think Connie is going to show what this actually does in the database as you're checking things off, and the way that it's different with new items that don't have a purchase history, and as you start to purchase things, the way the calculation can change. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, so after kind of calculating what the purchase interval will be from these functions, I'll just kind of show what that looks like in the UI. So, all right, so I'm gonna look at cookies actually. I'm gonna, let me hide this. So with cookies in the database, you can see that the current purchase interval is 9. And this one, I purposely chose one that has more than 2 purchases already, because I think that in the estimates function, it really changes the purchase interval if you have more than 2. So I'm going to check off and purchase cookies. And then if we go back here, you can see that the purchase interval has changed from 9 to 7, as well as, the last purchase date has been updated to right now, and the number of purchases as well. So that in our code is really this db.collection.doc.update, where we're feeding in, especially for this purchase interval, this new purchase interval, which we're using that estimate function, calculate estimate, to calculate. So, Andrew, did you want to touch on anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that is a bit, maybe confusing if you aren't working in it is just the way that estimate function works. And, basically the way the app works, the user starts by suggesting a span of time that they think is going to be, and we interpret that as a specific number of days, but a span of time they think is going to be how often they purchase an item. And at the beginning, when you first add it, because there isn't any history and there isn't a last purchase date, the estimate doesn't really do very much other than return the same thing the first time it's purchased. But after that, then it starts to adjust it based on the new interval. So it's a little, I hope I'm explaining it well. Probably I'm not, but
That's a really great explanation, actually. So
okay.
That was, and this is like, I feel like this is one of the ones that like is really hard to wrap your head around, and people always struggle with every time. So I thought that was a great explanation. It might even be worth doing like a quick Loom video or something explaining it, so that you can kind of link to that from the code in case somebody wants to go like watch a walkthrough of that specific curiosity in the code, because it's a weird one for sure.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah, we had a pretty easy time with just getting it to work and doing it. And then we refactored a bunch of times, and April helped us as well to just try to make everything read nicely and be very simple, because you're having this, different situation if it's null, and if it isn't, we were trying to think of the best way to make that read. But yeah, it does work.
Yeah.
I love that.
So yeah, I just want to reiterate this. Even when I was going through the project, every team has questions about how this algorithm works. And I think the way you explain it, Andrew, is really good. And we should probably use that explanation in the future to help teams out. And I guess the only question I had is that, do you want to explain a little bit more on how your pair decided on using the Luxon date objects, and like what was your kind of like criteria for choosing this add-on package? I think everyone would benefit from like learning on what your thought process was behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we were strongly encouraged to add some kind of date library, because there just isn't a lot of built-in functionality in JavaScript to handle those types of things. And we as a whole team, I think, well, as I think Sheila wasn't there this week, so Nick and Connie and I kind of sat down and looked at some of the options. I know that Moment.js was the old thing that a lot of people use and that we had heard of. So we looked at their what to do now since we're not supporting this anymore page, and there were a bunch of great suggestions there. And this was, it looked really straightforward, and we all just kind of went with it since it seemed like everything that we needed to do. And later on, knowing that we would need to be able to format dates and people's time zones and that sort of thing, it had all of that built in. So
If I'm
yeah.
not mistaken, I think Luxon was like a second iteration from one of the people that created Moment.
Yes.
So it kind of makes sense that they would, or
Yeah,
you all
Yes,
would
it's
find
the
this.
new thing. And there were a couple of
Yeah.
other alternatives that we also considered, but this was the first thing that looked like it had everything we need and worked really well and seems to be very widely used. So we thought it would be, a good choice.
Great.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for telling us more about that. All right. Does anyone have any other questions or comments about this demo?
I do just want to point out and give kudos for how well you've commented this portion of the code. It really helped during the review process to digest it. So right on for that.
Yes. Always, whenever my teammates comment out code like this, I always love it so much because 6 months from now, especially if you want to demo this code to like a future employer, things like that, you don't remember how this works or what kind of logic that you created. So commenting is always appreciated. Yeah. All right. So if there are no other comments or questions, I'll hand it over to who is going next with is it the learning module this week?
I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
me.
Cool.
Let me see if I can share the screen. Y'all just disappeared on me. Hold on. Okay. I am not going to be able to go full screen, I don't think. So we'll go through it this way. This week we're talking communication for devs. I do want to say that this team is really good at this and has been from the beginning. So hopefully we cover some things that are not second nature to you, but it seems to be the case for you all. So communication is key. Documentation, we just talked about it. You all are very good at documenting your code and writing code with documentation in it for us. We just talked about it, but helps you learn to summarize from a technical aspect of writing code to a plain English version of writing code. Great tool for revisiting these decisions that we talked about. One thing we haven't talked about is how useful it is for onboarding people. I have worked at 2 places that have been very bad at documenting, and it has been quite interesting to have to reach out to people and ask them to talk about their code from 6 months ago. So that's a great thing. It avoids institutional knowledge, which is what I was just talking about, and empowers all of the team members. Writing for the person who knows the least is a very good way of going about it, but it can also lead to over explaining. So it is a skill that needs to be fine-tuned to make sure that somebody who doesn't know anything about the code can jump in and learn pretty quickly, but also making sure that Joe Schmo, who's been there for 10 years, isn't reading through why you chose this JavaScript function if it seems straightforward. PRs gives reviewers context to your code, and it's a big part of interviewing is talking and walking through the code. So having a robust PR description helps you remember what you did. And I'm sure you've all experienced this just in the 2-3 days between PR reviews of going back through discussions and refreshing why you've ended up at this scenario. Screenshots, GIFs, and videos. We don't seem to be doing a ton of that on this team. I've noticed April throwing some celebratory GIFs in there at the end, which are always great, make you feel good when you've written the code. Links to resources and permalinks to code for your reference. Resources is something that we could, as a team, improve upon. I'm very bad at putting links in. So something like Luxon would be a good link to add to this pull request that you just merged. And then self-reviewing before asking others to review your code. You all are very good at that. Keep up that habit, please. Comments and code. Did we not go through this? Documentation. Comments and code, documentation. Give your team more context while they're actively tracing through your code that you implemented. Code can sometimes be self-documenting, but the decisions behind the code are not always self-apparent. This goes to me with the documentation process of making sure that you don't over-explain your code. Somebody coming in a position should be able to read code, so they should be able to understand some of the functionality of it. I was taught that your comments should explain why you did something, not necessarily what something is doing, as a first line of defense of over-explaining. What to write. Focus on the why this code was written rather than what the code does. Here's another example, and I will post these slides so we can look through examples then without taking up too much time, hopefully here. And then as you've worked in teams or in this team, how have you found, like, what is your experience with documentation and PR description, code comments? Do you have any feedback from the 4 weeks, 5 weeks we've been doing this now? Or any questions in general about communication?
I have more of a general question.
Yeah.
As far as documentation goes in like a typical like workplace or on a typical project in a real like job situation, what kind of format does that usually take? Is it just like having a really big README file for a project, or do some places actually have like more robust documentation for a project?
Sometimes it is just a really big README. Those are not my favorites, to be honest. I worked at a company that had multiple READMEs depending on what part of the code base you were in, to help break that down a little bit. And then their main README was an overview of what the overarching app is, some style guide suggestions and things to abide by, and some resources that would be helpful. But there are multiple ways of doing it. I know Notion is popular in some companies to help onboard people and document things. I don't know if any of the other mentors have some feedback on that.
Yeah, I know where I'm at, we have the latter one, where we have kind of a main README and an onboarding for getting set up with the code base. And within that, there are multiple links that link you to additional markdown pages that go into more detail about that step. So you'll work out of multiple different markdown files. And then each individual, like if we have separate directories or repositories that do specific functions, they'll also have their own README with instructions. And again, some of those lately have had link outs to Notion pages, but the vast majority we keep in our code base through markdown files. But I've also worked on open source projects, and it has a combination of the README file, and then it's through Mozilla. So there's some like Mozilla wiki pages and such. And again, those are just linked out from those READMEs.
Yeah, you'll also find a lot of different teams have different definitions of what they believe documentation is. And so it's highly team dependent. And that's something I think in an interview process, it's pretty fair game for you to ask about. And that's what I like to ask about, because some teams, they hate comments in code, which in my opinion, I don't see why they would hate that. But it really is really highly team dependent. And so getting a feel early on of how your team documents and like what they believe is valuable documentation is kind of like a nice like fit and feel for the so.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts about team
I
work?
have a question about like style guides. What is it exactly in terms of code, and how does it like differ from like a linter or something like that?
From my experience, a style guide is a way sometimes to set up your linter if they don't have a big linter installed in the repo already. But it's a guideline of how they want their code to look, in my opinion. I don't know if other mentors have, I don't know,
Yeah,
advice on this one.
I've seen it primarily in the open source communities. Sometimes either they haven't installed a formatter or a linter, which was the case when I first started working on the project that I work on. We didn't have Prettier installed. In fact, that was one of the tasks that I took on because I wanted Prettier. And so prior to that, we had a style guide, which stated, that we use single quotes and trailing commas and, basically just the expectations that was we wanted to see within our code base. It's much easier now that we do have it fully being checked automatically through both Prettier and ESLint. But for that initial period of time, it was on us before we turned in our codes or asked for reviews to kind of try to catch as many of those as possible.
I'm going to share it in Slack, but Airbnb actually has a very has a large style guide that a lot of smaller companies use when they don't want to create their own. If you want to take a look at that, you're more than welcome to. Any other questions or comments about any of the questions?
I wanted to expand a little bit. I know when you talked about like screenshots and screencasts and GIFs and so forth. I do them obviously because I think they're fun, but they actually do have a purpose too, which I know I use it quite a bit at work when I'm trying, particularly when I'm writing an issue, because I can do like a screencast and actually record the behavior that I'm seeing, because sometimes it's a little harder to articulate exactly what's happening just with words alone. So having just even a 30-second screen share to just kind of show what's happening and attach that in. And then when you do the fix, you can do the reverse of now showing the screencast of it not happening anymore. But so yeah, screenshots and screencasts I use heavily. Some of our my coworkers do transition their screencasts into more GIF kind of stuff if it's a real brief, just like a button flash or something.
That's a good call. I guess I also should expand upon the GIFs portion of it. For me, I tend to write in a manner that I don't know, could be considered serious. I'm not good at emotion when writing. So I tend to throw GIFs or emojis or different things in to make sure that people understand I'm not upset or talking down upon them, or I'm just trying to get my point across, but like be fun about it as well. So that's another level or tool for me to be able to express that like this is just my thoughts, but I'm not demanding anything or upset about it. So but if I think everybody else seems to be pretty quiet, so do we need to step to the next topic? I believe that's going to be issues.
Connie, did you have something? Oh no, that was a thumbs up. Okay, cool, great. All right, so issues this week. Let me pull those up. I'm gonna full screen it for myself. Okay, so this week we're going to be working on issues 11 and 12. And so we'll take a look first here at issue 11. So as a user, I want to be able to delete items from my shopping list so that my list isn't cluttered with items I don't want to buy in the future. And the breakdown of this is that we want to make sure that the user has the ability, if they make an error when entering an item or decide that they no longer want to purchase that item, that they can remove that from the list and keep their list tidy and organized. The acceptance criteria for this issue is that they must be able to delete an item from the shopping list. Before they delete, the delete happens, you need to prompt the user to confirm that they definitely want to delete. It is considered a destructive action, so you want to make sure that the user is aware of that and confirms. And that deletion should cause that associated record to be deleted from the database. And then just as some notes, as noted in the wireframe, that the delete link should pop up at that confirmation dialog because it's a destructive action. And then also keep in mind, as you know, you guys have been working very much in regards to the accessibility concerns of the app from the very beginning. Modals can be very, very challenging to get the right focus and behaviors in. So you might want to consider just doing a simple confirm dialog for that process. Are there any questions on this particular issue? Or clarifications needed? Okay. Then let's go to issue 12. As a user, I want to view a list of my shopping list items in order of how soon I am likely to need to buy each of them again, so that it's clear when I need to buy soon. So the possible item states are as follows: that you need to buy it soon, which is fewer than 7 days, that you need to buy it kind of soon, which is between 7 and 30 days, or you might need to, or not buy it not soon, which is anything over 30 days. An item is inactive when it hasn't been purchased for 2 times what its last estimate was. So if its last estimate was 14 and it hasn't been purchased for 28 days, it's considered inactive. The acceptance criteria for this issue is that the items in the list are shown as visually distinct, either through a background color or some other way to distinguish the different, the soon, kind of soon, and not so soon. And the items should be sorted by the estimated number of days until the next purchase. And the items with the same number of estimated days until purchase should be sorted alphabetically, as well as items of different states should be described distinctly when read by a screen reader. And you can see on the wireframe here, they do mention that the use of the ARIA labels will help you for that process of just making sure that the ARIA label is able to describe the time interval of how soon the user will need to buy it again, in addition to the item name. And for the notes on this one, the criteria for the item being inactive can be a little bit confusing. So that's why they give kind of the same example I did, which is if the last estimate was 14 days and it's been 28 days, then it is considered inactive at that point. So, and then teams in the past often have over-engineered this solution, breaking the list out into separate groups, but it should be achievable in a single list with visual treatment being different based on what category the item falls into. And then be sure to use the color as to denote that the user will need to buy the item soon, which again is in the wireframe. And so in this case, they chose to do the checkbox green or as orange, red, or gray. So, but we leave that to your creativity on how you want to handle that. Any questions on this one? Yes, Andrew.
This might be kind of a spoiler question of how it should be done, but like I have just kind of been wondering about this. My coming from like an SQL background, my instinct would be like, this could be handled in a single monstrous query, but I'm kind of guessing that in Firebase, from what I've seen before, that is probably not the right approach, or maybe there is better documentation than what I've found on how to do complicated querying, like for example, where you're doing math between dates. Like Does anyone know if that is possible or isn't before I spend a bunch of time figuring that out? Or like, is there a good resource on that sort of thing?
Having not worked in Firestore much or Firebase.
Well,
Um,
if not, like if you don't know, then it'll be.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm
wondering if
not
anyone knows
entirely
off
sure,
their
but
head.
yeah, and it might be one of those where maybe when you search into that, even if you don't keep it specific to Firebase, but maybe just kind of working in regards to it being the NoSQL and like how you would go about it from just that more generalized approach, you might get some solutions that, you know, if you run dry on looking for things that are specific to Firebase, maybe that'll lead you to some answers as well.
Yeah, I found that Firebase seems very different from MongoDB as well. But I've not worked with it a lot outside of this project at all. So I was just curious. So.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, so the pairs that we have set up for this week would be Nick and Ander, and then Sheila and Connie. And I know we don't yet know the status of Sheila at the moment, so we may be in a scenario like we were last week of, you know, Connie maybe needing to either pair with one of you independently or do another mob session of some kind, and you know, to get some additional insight and help on the task that gets assigned. So with that in mind,
I have some extra time this week if like this week is much better for me, if that's helpful. If Sheila isn't around, I would be happy to work on either with anyone.
Great, thank you. I think with that in mind, I think I'd like to go ahead and do what we did last week, which is to give Connie first choice on which issue she feels like she'd like to tackle, given that she may have a little bit more independent work on this one.
I think number 11, the delete would be good.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I mean, last week it's turned out really well, so I can kind of try to take a first stab at it, and then maybe after a few days we can all meet together to kind of go over our code. That was another thing just with last week. We like actually walked each team, we walked each other through our code to kind of explain it and just give any feedback like in real time. So that worked really well too for our team.
Great. And then Ander and Nick, that would be you guys working on this issue 12 of sorting and distinguishing the different states. Okay. I will set up those pair bots as soon as we get off the call here for you guys to utilize for your communication on those issues. Right. And I think we actually like are wrapping up early, unless y'all have something you want to talk about. Like we usually run over,
speedy.
Jennifer.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed. Usually all the meetings that I had in the past too always ran over. Bravo. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out, Ander, I know you mentioned about the complex queries in Firebase. I just did a quick Google search and I saw that there is a package that actually puts a layer of SQL on top to run queries. I'll drop that in the Slack channel, so you can take a look at that documentation. I didn't really look very closely if it's only real-time database or Firestore, so you might have to check that out on your own. But I thought that I would put that in there since that might be what you're looking for.
Nice, thank you.
I will post in Slack about office hour availability this week. I think that's on me. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess since we have a little bit of extra time, do any of you all have any random questions too?
Yeah.
Or anything that you're curious about?
I'm curious to know what the transition from being a collabie to being a collab mentor has been.
Oh yeah, sure. I was a collabie for, you guys are TCL 26, right?
Yeah.
I was TCL 5.
Oh,
I think, and also Stacy was TCL 1, I believe. So it's I was one of the earlier collabies, and it's been really great, I think, because basically Collab Lab taught me how to break down a project and kind of understand how to best manage and go through a project as a team. And so I think it really resonated with me because I'm a very like organizational focused person. And I had such a good time at Collab Lab, I never left. And so that's how they have an assistant mentor program. And so I volunteered to be an assistant mentor, because I also did the TCL pilot, which is like TCL, I guess, what do they call it, 2.0 or something? The one where there's another
advanced
project that
I
you,
think they
a
call
more
it.
advanced project that you can work on. So I did that one too. So after I did those two back to back, I decided to be an assistant mentor. But the mentor, so typically there's 3 mentors on a team. That mentor had to bow out because of like personal reasons. And so I all of a sudden became an official TCL mentor on accident. But it's really great for me. It's really rewarding, kind of knowing that TCL really values your experience and being able to use that experience to teach other people. And you never have to worry about like, oh, I don't know enough, which is not the case, because you can always like share your knowledge and what you've learned so far. And so I think that's the thing I found most rewarding about jumping from collabie to mentor. And now that I've been working, I guess, for a couple of years now, like I have even more experience to like share with everyone. And so that's why I love kind of being a guest mentor now, even though I don't have time to go through the process with the whole cohort. I like popping in here and there because I get to meet all y'all new people. And I just really appreciate everyone that goes through Collab Lab, because I know you all are taking the time to make yourselves better developers and better team players. And it's just like, it's like, I wish everyone could go through Collab Lab before they get their first dev job, because it'll really help you kind of being able to pick through projects and just like quickly get onboarded and just get going. So yeah, it's my little spiel. But yeah, so if you all have any questions for me, because I used to be a collabie too, you can feel free to DM me or like tag me, since I'm already in your TCL channel, like any questions that you have. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I didn't go through Collab Lab, but I went through an internship that was kind of similar, where I was just kind of part of a team. And when I first got the internship, and the very first meeting that I had with the mentor of the group, and they asked like, well, what do you want to take away from this? Like, what do you want to learn? And they were actually a little surprised when I was like, I want to learn what it means and what it feels like to be on a team. Like, what does that look like? And they were expecting me to say, oh, I want to get better at this part of React, or I want to learn this skill, or I want to, and I was like, no, I want to just know, what does it feel like to be, that process. Just so it's kind of interesting. It's great.
Yeah,
the focus of this whole program is exactly that, because I think it's really, really valuable.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to say I ripped off, but I ripped off Collab Lab's process, and I'm in charge of like interns and where I work. And so I basically run Collab Lab as the internship. So that's why I'm saying like, I love Collab Lab. I'll always be here, just because like the learning how to work on a development team is like, usually when you get onboarded, that's such like a big overhead to just learn that process, and then also learning the new code base and everything. So it's really helpful to have a kind of like a teamwork sandbox to try it all out in. So yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. I could talk forever. So to respect everybody's time, if y'all have don't have any more questions, like I'm done with my spiel. So
Awesome.
feel free to reach out to me some other time if you have any questions.
Well, I think if we're all good, then we're all good for the week. Great.
All right.
Great. It was nice meeting you all.
Thank you for
Great to meet you as
coming
well.
in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, all the mentors.
Right.
Problem.
Bye.